In this episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast, I'm joined again by Dr. Phil Plisky. He has been a distinguished guest of mine in the past, and he is a phenomenal individual, especially in the world of sports medicine and orthopedic practice. Dr. Plisky and I are going to be discussing the importance of collaboration between physical therapy, athletic training, and strength and conditioning. And this is an area Dr. Plisky is very familiar with, as he's actually a physical therapist, athletic trainer, and a certified strength and conditioning specialist. So he gets to wear all three hats simultaneously. So we offer a lot of great insight, and I certainly learned a lot from chatting with Dr. Plisky today. I know you're going to love this episode. Enjoy. Phil, welcome back to the podcast. I'm super excited to talk with you again.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. It's always a great time.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I always tell people, if I'm bringing someone back on for a second or third time, you know they're really good at what they do, and you're certainly no exception to that. I've been able to learn a lot from you myself over our conversations, over your MedBridge courses, and just the general impact you've had on the field of sports medicine, Phil. But you know, I'm sure there's someone out there who hasn't quite heard of you before, or maybe they haven't heard of all the amazing things you're doing over in Evansville. Would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the stuff that you do?
Sure. Thank you so much. I don't know that I deserve all that, but it's, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who haven't heard of me, quite frankly, and probably some people who wish maybe they haven't heard of me. But yeah, so I'm a physical therapist, athletic trainer, strength coach. I'm a professor at the Doctor of Physical Therapy program at the University of Evansville. And then I spend my other time consulting in professional sports and the military for performance systems. So I get to wear a lot of hats, do a lot of fun things.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And kind of like you mentioned, you have this unique role where you can kind of play as an athletic trainer, you can play as a physical therapist, and you can play as a strength coach. And I'd imagine sometimes you're doing all three of those jobs at the same time, and other times you're kind of more focused on one of the three. Is that correct?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I always, yeah, it is. It depends on what I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and probably most frequently it is all three hats at once. So.
Yeah, and it's funny because I just had someone this morning that I was working with ask me. She was like, you know, what's the difference between you and this person and that person? Like, a lot of people have a hard time differentiating between the physical therapy, the athletic training, the strength coach, and a lot of the athletes don't really understand the difference themselves. You know, they're like, hey, you know, I go to my AT and they do scraping, and then I go to you and you do scraping as a PT. So, you know, where does the line come in? And I guess that's something I want to start with here today, Phil, is, you know, you kind of wearing all three hats at the same time. Where do you see the lines kind of being drawn or differentiating between athletic training, physical therapy, and strength and conditioning?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question and an interesting point. And as we try to draw lines, I think that actually probably leads into maybe some of the challenges we face and some of the challenges we face discussing our own professional responsibility. And so, you know, one way I like to think about it is truly a continuum of care, right, for an athlete. And you know, that continuum of care starts, if I think of it, I think it starts at athletic training with prevention and initial emergency management of injuries in sport or industry. Now, that profession of athletic training continues on into rehabilitation and kind of continues on into performance, right? So it's got this wide breadth of what the profession does. Now you look at physical therapy, and physical therapy kind of has this maybe middle, you know, of it. Now some physical therapists, you know, do a little bit more of the emergency management, those board certified in sports and things like that. But in general, if you were to kind of say, okay, physical therapy really hits the rehabilitation, some into the prevention, some into, you know, a little bit into emergency management, but not nearly as much, and then continues on to performance, right? And then strength and conditioning specialists really kind of pick up where both of those professions start to leave off, right? I think both athletic trainers and physical therapists should be a little bit into the performance realm, and some have a lot more knowledge, especially if they are, certified as a strength and conditioning coach. But really, where that picks up in later stage rehabilitation, performance picks up and continues on into a whole realm of performance optimization. So you can see just even in that description why there might be some overlap, some confusion. It is a challenge.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, I like to think that the lines are intentionally gray, right?
Right.
Physical therapy is kind of unique in the sense that, you can do anything from quad squeezing and straight leg raises all the way up to barbell back squat. And it's all
Right.
still physical therapy. It's all still skilled care. And I like how you broke it down in the continuum as well, because like you mentioned, a lot of the times I see ATs more on the acute management side, the emergency management side. And speaking from experience, that's something that doesn't always get included very heavily in the PT
No,
program.
not at
So,
all. Yeah.
and that's a whole different world in itself, right? Like it's not just orthopedic musculoskeletal injuries. What happens if an athlete goes into anaphylactic shock on the field, right? You might
For
be the one
sure.
that responds to that. So having additional training in that is certainly a good thing. And, I'll even take it a step further and say from an ortho side, all of the different special tests that we learn in school, it's great. We get a lot of repetitions, a lot of practice on them, but we very rarely get to feel what a positive lockman or a positive
Right.
pivot shift feels like until we're out in the world. And, I don't think that that kind of individual is the one that you want responding to the emergency situation if they've never felt it before.
Right.
So I think that, having those different fields of specialization make us all better and allow us all to be, able to function at a higher level of the different things that we're meant to do, I would say.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's kind of interesting as you bring up, emergency management and you think about that. Let's give a skill that is maybe more thought of for physical therapists, although athletic trainers have this skill of spinal manipulation. Okay, may not be fully in the athletic trainer's wheelhouse, maybe depending on the training, depending on the schooling and the State Practice Act. But spinal manipulation is in the physical therapist wheelhouse. It's not in the strength and conditioning specialist wheelhouse, and it is less pronounced in the athletic training wheelhouse. I think what's interesting though is if I were to characterize you as a physical therapist and I said, you know what, your real wheelhouse is spinal manipulation, you'd be like, that's something I do. But it's not the totality of what I do, and
Right.
it's a lot more. And I think from an athletic training perspective, I think that's also sometimes what happens is because we tend to really glom onto the difference and where we can say, physical therapists really aren't trained. It is not an entry level skill. I teach in an entry level program. It is not an entry level skill to provide emergency management in the athletic venue setting. That is not a skill that is part of our basic board competencies. Therefore, it's easy to point to that skill and go, that's what an athletic trainer does. And just like if I said your skill is spinal manipulation, you'd be like, well, yeah, that's one thing I do. And I think the athletic trainer is probably saying the same thing if you differentiate a physical therapist and an athletic trainer, they would kind of say the same thing. It's like, yeah, the emergency management, sideline coverage and things like that, that is certainly something I do and can be a big part. But man, I've got a profession that's way broader than that.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up. And it's so funny you say that because the amount of times that athletes will come in to work with me and I tell them all, like, just so you know, I can't do what your athletic trainer does. Like I'm spoiled.
Right.
On a busy day, I see 15 to 16 people. So I get a lot of one-on-one time, individualization time. And I know that in the athletic training world, like you might have one AT for an entire high school.
Right.
So
And
one
15 people are coming in at 2:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah. So it's like, how do you juggle and manage when you have so many people? And that's one of the many areas that I kind of tip my hat to those guys and gals is it's like, you have to have a plan in place to see so many people all at the same time and provide value to all of them. And, I don't think that the value has to come from super sexy, attractive Instagram exercises. I think
Right.
simple things done very well provides value. I think there's value in 10 to 15 minutes of daily range of motion work on targeted areas, or 10 to 15 minutes of targeted basic strengthening on areas that we know there's deficit. 3 sets of 10 straight leg raise and clamshells might not change anyone's life, but if you do them regularly, it's certainly not going to allow you to regress backwards by any
Sure.
means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing is, and again, you think about that continuum, if you were to say what a strength and conditioning specialist does, and you were to say, well, they're really good at Olympic lifting. Really, like that's almost, and you can see how it almost would be offensive, to go, well, gosh, you aren't even characterizing a tenth of the things that I'm considering, looking at, thinking about when I'm designing performance programs. And so I think that's where a lot of this boils down to is really, having that humility of what you're kind of saying of, wow, what is the other person doing? What is the other person, experiencing? And I don't know that, and I'm not as good at that. I think that's a key point to really kind of start the process. So
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's funny because I've met and worked with athletic trainers that I trust more with certain athletes and certain individuals than some PTs.
oh, for sure.
And it's kind of weird to say that when you're a physical therapist and you're like, you know what, I trust that person more than this person in my profession.
Yeah. Well, and
But
that's the thing too. I think as we look at different professions, I think, I mean, in my top 5 of people that I would send my kids to and do send my kids to, I've got, an osteopath, you think, oh, that's in conflict with the physical therapy profession. No, they're just great. I've got a chiropractor who is absolutely amazing. Physical therapists that are incredible, and strength coaches and athletic trainers who all of those professions go in there. So there's elite in all of those professions. And there's also kind of the bottom of the barrel in all of those professions too. And, there's physical therapists that I wouldn't, necessarily send my dog to, just like there's strength coaches and athletic trainers in that same realm.
yeah, and I think that speaks to the importance of specialization, which is something that you and I have talked about at length previously. Not every strength coach is well versed in the world of high level sports.
Right.
Or maybe they're more well versed in a specific sport than others. Maybe they grew up playing lacrosse, played lacrosse in college, worked with the college lacrosse team on an internship, and now they work primarily with lacrosse athletes. Well, if
Right.
it looks like a dog, smells like a dog, it's probably a dog. So lacrosse, yeah, they'll go to that person. But, if someone else doesn't have that experience, maybe they're not the lacrosse person. Same thing with the athletic training world is, there's ATs I see working with college and high school athletes all day long. There's other ATs I see that are kind of in more of like a military type role in the armed forces. And I'd imagine those are very different.
Yeah.
So naturally, my ability to send an athlete or individual to one of them is going to differ based on their skill set and expertise. And I mean, same thing with PT, right? Like there's a reason you don't see me treating someone with Parkinson's disease in the clinic.
Right.
I don't even know where to start at this point, I'll be honest. So I'd rather admit my downfalls and say, look, TMJ, pelvic floor, neurological diseases, that sort of thing. Those are not my wheelhouse, but hey, here's someone who's going to be better at those than myself. And I think the more we kind of play into each other's strengths, the better we all become and the better our outcomes for our patients become as well.
For sure. Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah. And how do you feel that kind of blends into the world of strength and conditioning, Phil? Because I've seen a lot of debate recently about, strength coaches doing like rehabilitative things, or, maybe it's a PT practicing in an insurance-based model and they can't get additional authorization visits. And the strength coaches kind of take over. How do you feel about that? And where do you feel that kind of is progressing long term here, I'll say?
I think I think it boils down to the care of the athlete and being passionate about caring for that athlete. I'll give an example of a statistic, and I'll quote something not fully knowing, but one of my colleagues who does a lot in private practice, and he says that the research says that about 10% or less of people who need physical therapy get it. Okay. So not all the population, you're saying 10% get physical therapy. It's like less than 10% who need it get it. And I kind of think of, and I think of that statistic, and I think of, what we're doing in ACL reconstruction rehabilitation. It is so hard. We know someone needs to have rehabilitation for an entire year in structured programs and things like that. But in our insurance-based model, in our current healthcare system, that's almost impossible, right? We need to go to cash-based models and things like that. But that's where right now, literally, I've got a patient with an ACL reconstruction that the athletic trainer is seeing the person once, maybe up to 3 or 4 times per week in the athletic training room. They're seeing me once a week in physical therapy, and that's going to transition into strength and conditioning here really soon. And you look at that, what a collaborative model to get the care that they need. I think if I'm worried about what someone else is doing, I'm probably not doing the best I can be doing in my own profession at that point in time. If I have to say, oh, this person shouldn't be doing that, then where is that person going to get that care from? I'm not advocating going out of scope of practice or anything like that. But we tested, 20 people on a football team at a local high school. 3 of them had knee surgery, and 3 of them, one of them didn't have any ankle dorsiflexion on that side. 2 of them had pain with squatting. And those people have been fully rehabilitated, and so that's a slam on the physical therapy that was occurring there. That's a slam on the athletic trainer, and that's a slam on strength and conditioning, right? We should have this collaborative model that are just caring for those athletes.
I completely agree. And like you said, in a case like that, it's not just one individual that's responsible, right? If PT says, look, we have no more visits, you're discharged, then we can't just blame the whole thing on the PT, but likewise, we can't blame it all on the AT either. And I'll even take it a step further. We can't blame that whole situation on the ortho doc either. I'm curious, on that specific example that you gave in the ACL world, how did you go about facilitating collaboration between AT, strength coaches, and yourself?
Well, we're in a fortunate situation that we have athletic trainers at the high school, who are, that's what they spend a half day doing is that athletic coverage. So we're very fortunate to have that cooperation. But I think what it really comes down to, honestly, is having respect for the other profession, having communication with the other profession, having your own humility to go, hey, this is my skill set. And I'm okay that you and the athletic trainer and I share a skill set. So if I take my athletic training hat off, it's okay that they can do rehabilitation. I think it's awesome. You know why? Because the athlete needs to be taken care of. And so if I have that humility, if I have the respect for the other profession, and I communicate, and I do that in a way that has empathy wrapped around it, meaning I can look at the other profession and go, like you said earlier, it's got to be kind of hard to manage 15, 30 athletes in an hour period who are high school athletes that may or may not be listening while the coach is breathing down your neck and the parents are calling and all this kind of stuff. Man, I can maybe see why maybe their communication hasn't been as good with me, but that's how I approach it. I approach it with that, and I'm not the best at humility, but that's what I try to go with is, hey, they're doing a lot, and if we can work together in this common outcome of the athlete, it goes so much better. That we don't even have to worry about turf or lines or anything like that. It's let's get the athlete taken care of.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I like that approach, and I like having the ability to kind of step back and, as you said before, just be upfront, open, and honest about the situation, and being willing to listen as well to the other professions, because as difficult as it might be for us to accept sometimes we're wrong, and
Oh,
sometimes
absolutely.
someone else is right. So knowing that it's okay to step back, and you're not going to solve all the world's problems on your own, and you're going to be wrong at times, I think is a huge part of that as well. Because take the AT-PT example again. If you're new grad PT versus like 20-year experience AT, and you're not sure if you're feeling a positive Lockman or not, and the AT knows it, because they felt it hundreds of times in their career. That's an example of where someone who's got the experience but maybe not the doctorate degree or the PT background or something like that can really reign supreme. So I think there's a lot of value in what you just kind of outlined there. But I'd imagine things don't always go according to plan. And
Right.
there's sometimes when people might not want to work together, people might not want to collaborate, or people might just say, look, I need you to stay out of this situation. I'm going to handle the whole thing on my own. From my angle, I would imagine that's a pretty dangerous place to be. What do you
It
think?
really is. Yeah. And that's the interesting thing. And we've given a lot of examples of high school or maybe even college, rehab, performance and athletic training all working together. But, when we go in and consult at the professional level, the number one thing I can tell you, the health of the organization by whether athletic training, physical therapy, and strength and conditioning are all together, or if there's literally a wall between the athletic training room and the performance facility, the physical therapists have their own room, and the ones that can kind of go, all right, we're all in this together, that it's a game changer for the players. It's a game changer for the athletes. And it does go wrong. And I think if it is ever going wrong, you gave the example of the person that says, I'm going to control this, I'm going to do everything for the athlete, I'm going to be the quarterback of this team. The best way to respond to that person is with humility, respect, and communication, right? And then looking at that empathy. Well, maybe that person who's trying to quarterback everything, maybe they've been burned before, and their athlete got a really bad outcome and they were blamed for it. So they're like, now I'm going to take charge. So we can put that in our mind and go, okay, I can approach this situation with humility. Hey, go ahead and be that quarterback. How can I help you? How can I, do something? Because we have that respect, we have that communication, and just keep going over and over again with that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you've mentioned it a couple times here. Having good communication is pretty essential as well. How do you go about facilitating the communication, or how often? Like, are you talking with individuals daily or weekly or monthly, or how do you kind of break up your little I don't know what I want to call it, like team meetings, I guess I'll say.
Right. It really depends on the circumstance, the context of things that are going on. If we're working, with, getting a professional athlete or a college athlete back to something, very quickly, very aggressively, it actually can be daily, and it's best as a quick text message for me that say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I worked on. This is what you need to do. If it's more long-term rehab type of thing, at the beginning, it's a lot, it may be every visit, but as we go farther out, and as long as things are going well, it's not nearly as much. And so I think that context really drives the frequency of communication and the preference of the parties. I think of the, husband and wife who were married for 50 years. And they told me once, they said, he doesn't tell me that he loves me anymore. And he said, you know what? I told you at the beginning, and I told you if anything changes, I would let you know. And, I kind of think of that, as far as communication preferences, we can't let our own communication preference, though, drive that communication train. Let's just ask. I'm really big on just asking, hey, how often do you want to hear from me? Is it, and when I'm communicating to you, please understand that I'm not communicating to tell you what to do. It's more to inform you so that we're on the same page with the athlete, so that when the athlete asks me if they can return to run, that what I said, so that you don't accidentally step on it and go, oh shoot, I told them they could, and now we have this conflict.
Yeah, no, I see what you're getting at there, and I like the ask approach instead of tell. I think that comes from a much better position than, being the one to tell everyone else how it's going to be. I think that asking is always a good thing. And even, I'll occasionally email and present a plan for someone and then
Mhm.
ask input and feedback. Like, do you have any other thoughts or any other input? Or, hey, is there anything that I missed here? And 99% of the time, I don't even hear back about like, hey, do this instead, or this should be better,
Right.
or something like that. It just kind of follows suit. But I think it's important to open up the table for those discussions. And I
Well, and
also think,
I'll take that a step further
yeah,
because
go for it.
again, when I see there's a couple strength coaches that I work with literally are the best in the world. And their humility, their genuine humility is off the charts, yet they're at the highest level of pro sport. But with that said, even saying, hey, here's the plan. Do you have any input? If we take it a step back and say, hey, do you have a plan? Or would you like me to put together one that we can collaborate on? Right. So now rather than me even saying, here's my plan, do you want to add to it? It's, hey, maybe you already have a plan that maybe we can collaborate on. And so that can even open up that door of communication even more, because now we're saying, I value what you have to say, and maybe the best way to go about this is you send me your plan and I'll make any edits or additions that we need to, versus trying to open it up with, hey, here's everything I have, do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I love that approach that you just outlined, and I love that just kind of take on it. I haven't thought about it like that before, Phil. And I think that really allows you to see what someone else knows, where their knowledge base is, because hey, maybe you have a strength coach who they don't have any formal education on the ACL rehab process, but they actually know, like, hey, we're going to hold plyo until this point. We're going to hold this movement until that point. Like, they might know that from past experience, but if you don't give them a chance to spread their wings, then you're not ever going to see them prove it to you.
Right.
So I
Absolutely.
think,
And you've also may have alienated them in the process because you assumed that they don't know, or you assume that they don't have a plan by sharing yours automatically. And you wouldn't believe the number of times I've done that.
yep,
Where I just go, okay, here's my plan, and I've, again, in the past few years I've learned that in strength and conditioning, that the best coaches in the world lay back until they're asked, and even when they're asked, they're kind of like, yeah, I don't even know if this is right, but this is what I do, and
it's
then they give it to you and it's absolute brilliance. And you're like, wow,
where did this
I,
come
I
from?
didn't even think of that. I didn't even have that gear, I didn't
Right.
even know that was an option. So,
You talking about that, this is coming at a perfect time. So one, I actually have to send a few emails to AT strength coach, like kind of at like a university school type setting there, about some individuals. And I already have, like, the long drafted out emails that I normally write. And I'm going to cut and paste that into a Word document for later and just
yep.
kind of shift gears into something like this and say, like, look, here's what I'm working with, here's where they're at. Do you have a plan?
Yeah.
And go from there.
Yeah. And I
I
would, yeah. And I
like
would
that
say, yeah,
approach.
absolutely.
Um,
Like what is your plan? How can I help you?
yep. Yeah, that's it.
And then we've just kind of gone, all right, you're kind of, and again, I don't care who the captain of the ship is, and I don't care if they're indeed the captain of the ship or think they're the captain of the ship. It doesn't matter to me. All that matters to me is I get done what I need done with the athlete.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We all play our role. And I like to say that the most important thing at the end of the day is the person you're working with gets where they want to be.
Yeah.
I don't care if that goal is just get back to daily life or get back to high level sport. If they get where they want to be successfully, then everyone wins. And I think that's another important piece too, is sometimes athletes have been injured for so long or in pain for so long that sport isn't even part of the consideration anymore.
Mhm.
And that can be tough for us all to kind of swallow sometimes. Is like, we work with athletes, we want to get them back on the field and go and watch them play again, but sometimes athletes might not want that, and it's important to make sure we put their wants and needs and desires above our own. I also want to talk a second on that point you made too, about like just the expertise and knowledge that you can gain from other individuals. I have learned so much myself from Danny Foley and the Rude Rock guys on various approaches to training and injury management. They take a more fascia-based training approach, and they've taught me their fascia line assessment for various fascial sling systems and that sort of thing. And it's like, that's a whole new way of thinking. It's a whole new concept. I've never thought of that before. And here I am learning that from four strength coaches, one of whom is younger than me.
Right.
And it's kind of crazy to like learn, a whole new approach, a whole new line of thought, and something that's been extremely successful based on my rather limited experience with it so far, from individuals who don't really have that formal physical therapy lens or the formal AT lens even. So I think that there's plenty of value that we can learn from others like that. And I think that the power of the internet even makes that more simple, I would say, simpler. We look at like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and we kind of demonize them real quick, or we're quick to critique other individuals, but sometimes we can look at what they're doing and say that there's value there. And maybe we don't see it at first, or maybe we're like, what the heck are they doing here? This makes no sense. But if it's working for the individual, then there's obviously value in it. And I think that the more we kind of learn and share from others, the more well-equipped we are going to be ourselves.
Well, and I think that, I think like you say, we demonize people, what they're sharing and all this kind of stuff. I think the best approach to that is have a systematic evaluation and testing system, all the way from simple rehabilitation through performance. And when you have that simple system, you can then test out these ideas and go, okay, this is what I'm working on. I'm working on, power here. And the intervention I do has this effect on power immediately. Well, what if I take this Instagram power thing that kind of makes some sense and I like, and I put that in and I retest power? Then I can tell if it's working or not. Otherwise, I get distracted, right? There are a million different ways to peel this onion, but you've got to keep it simple and know what it's trying to do when it's trying to do it. And I think if you're not systematic from the evaluation and testing perspective, you're going to be chasing your tail in the exercise perspective.
Exactly. And it allows you to play into each other's strengths, not just from a skill standpoint, but a financial standpoint, because at the end of the day, all of these different things cost money.
Right.
I might not have the money for a Biodex machine in my outpatient clinic because those things are a little pricey.
Right.
But, an AT at a university setting where they're doing research, they might have a Biodex machine that they can use and do testing on that. I might not have access to fancy force plates and that sort of thing, but AT at university with research going on there on those things, they might have access to them. So that's going to allow us to, as you said, build our system, but also access higher level data that we wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Absolutely.
Same thing with a strength and conditioning environment. Some of the different like speed and agility tests that are done. Imagine if we could look at every athlete who's torn their ACL, look at their flying 10, their 40-yard dash, their vertical jump, all of that stuff pre-injury, and then run it again post-injury and see where those numbers are. Like, that's a huge advantage. But us as PTs, we almost never have all that information on someone, test all that information on someone, and then get to test it all again post. We really have to have the ability to, as we've been saying, collaborate with these other individuals and make the best of all the different worlds. And maybe you're spoiled enough to have all of them within arm's reach at the same facility, but if not, I think that's where the power of, like we've said, communication, email, text message, phone call. I mean, I've connected with people through Instagram and Facebook before like this. So all of these things really come into play at the end of the day.
For sure. Absolutely. And like you say, it boils down to consistency of information and communication.
Yeah, exactly. And Phil, I know that's something that you are always helping others to become better at, and you're always preaching to your coaching group as well over at philplisky.com for people who want to learn more from you or check out the Coaches Club, that sort of thing, where can they find you at, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. So philplisky.com, PHILPLISKY. You can find a lot of information there. You can find out about the Coaches Club. Right now, the enrollment in that is not open, but it will be later in the year. And it's just a great group of people that we are just learning together, kind of learning in an environment that I think is a way that we all have the humility and we're not afraid to ask the questions. We're not afraid to ask the performance questions as PTs, as strength coaches. We're not afraid to ask the rehabilitation questions and the injury questions, and athletic trainers, the same thing. So it's just a group of people who are there to support each other. So that's the Coaches Club. We have a lot of fun with that. You can find me on all the social media channels, Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, or Mom Book, or however we call it. But
MySpace. You're more the MySpace
exactly.
generation.
You can find me on my MySpace channel. But yeah, so yeah, absolutely. I love the questions. I love to teach. It's what my passion is. I believe we're building the future of rehabilitation and performance. I think we're doing some great things now, but we can do it a lot better. And I think that's what we're all striving for. And if we do that together, it's a big win.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Phil. Is there any other closing thoughts or closing remarks or anything else you wanted to share today?
I think it's just approach regardless of what profession you're in. I think if you just approach the other professions with that humility, respect, and high quality communication, I think we're just going to do a lot better for our athletes. And I think that's my take home message: is keep the athlete in mind. Don't worry about turf wars. Don't worry about who's in charge, who's running the show. Just worry about how you can get that athlete to be better. And if the other person's frustrating you or pissing you off, maybe they've got a bad life situation going on right now, or their work situation's horrible, and maybe you can help them out and make it a little easier for them.
Yeah, exactly. Offer yourself as a servant and someone who can help instead of trying to take over the entire project. And
Absolutely.
oddly enough, I think a lot of people push back on that, saying, but I need to see X amount of people from a financial standpoint. And I found that the more you take care of others, the more they're going to want to take care of you.
That's
So
exactly right, man. You hit the nail on the head. The servant leadership. Remember, we're seeing less than 10% of the people who need rehabilitation are being seen. So, I've seen it time and time again. Small town of 2,000 people or 3,000 people. We built it ourselves, where we were open 3 half days per week, and everybody would say, "Oh, you can't even survive in a town that size." By the time we left in 3 years, we had 4 physical therapists working full time. And I've seen that replicated not only in Idaho, but in, Southern Indiana, Southern Illinois, rural areas. They're just, people need to be taken care of. And if you treat them right and you treat other people right, it'll go real well for you.
yeah, I love that approach and love that end message here, Phil. We will link to your website, your MedBridge courses, your social media profiles. I forgot. I think the other one was Friendster before MySpace.
Is that what it is? Okay,
that might have been more your era. We'll
hey,
link
easy
to
there.
all of that below. Phil, I really appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure talking with you and learning from you and sharing your vast array of knowledge and insight with the world, man. I appreciate you.
Oh, well, I'm glad to be here, and it is truly a lot of fun. So I hope to be back sometime.
Hey everyone, I want to take a second and tell you all about AliRx. AliRx is a at-home food sensitivity and gut health testing panel. You order online and then receive and complete your test at home for food sensitivities. You then receive a custom report online through your member portal, and then receive personalized recipes and supplements that are catered to you based on your food sensitivities. If this is something that interests you, you can check out the link and description in my bio, and you can use the coupon code capital D, capital B, RAUN, capital RX, so D Brawn RX, at checkout to save yourself 20%. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast. If you liked this episode, please make sure to share it with a friend, subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes, and leave a review. This way we can spread knowledge and motivation and help reach more people. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.